Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, All In Health and Wellness. If you're looking for a health coach, you're looking for a sports performance coach, you're looking for nutrition guidance, like for instance, a meal by meal plan that will help you understand how to eat. It will teach you how to eat, and it will give your body, your cells, the proper nutrition to feel great and be able to perform at your best, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. If you're looking for those things, you're looking for the key to improve your sports performance, both from a nutrition standpoint and an exercise physical standpoint and a mental standpoint as you approach your athletic event. All In Health and Wellness is able to help in these areas. Go to allinhealthandwellness.com and you'll find the contact information for how to get in touch with them and get started on the plan that will improve your life. So Seth, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So one of the things that I love about people like you in that, like, you're in a different world, you're doing a different thing, something happens in your life, and you go, okay, now I've got a different passion, a different calling, a different way to help people.
Yeah.
And from what I found, like that, there's nothing wrong with people that go, hey, I'm 7 years old and I want to be this when I grow up, and they become that. But I think there's a different type of passion and drive behind people that go, wait a minute, I had to fix my life. Now I want to fix everybody else's. So talk to us a little bit about what happened and how that sort of turned your steering of your life a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that perspective on it. It's, from my perspective, it was an interesting experience.
Mhm.
I started in music. So I went to a school in Nashville, Tennessee, got a degree kind of in music business. And then for the next 15 years, kind of between Nashville and then eventually I wound up in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
I was a touring musician and artist and producer and songwriter, and that took me all over the world,
Right.
and eventually kind of led me into the electronic music scene, in which I became a DJ and an artist. And I was actually touring. I would write and release songs, and I would go play shows in clubs and fly around and do that. And I was living in Los Angeles, and it's kind of funny chronologically. My story is a little bit different chronologically than you would think,
Yeah.
because at the time I didn't know anything. I wasn't sick. I didn't know anything about mold, or mold related illnesses, or certainly mycotoxins. Um, but I had a friend who introduced me to a guy who introduced me to a chemist, and this
Mhm.
chemist had this amazing formula that could prevent mold and blah blah blah. And I was I find things that interest me. I kind of, my intuition just guides
Mhm.
me, and
Yeah.
it always has through life.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I got deeper into it, and I said, oh, that's really cool. And I didn't know anything about mold or anything about chemical manufacturing or
Right.
chemistry. But I knew there was enough of a problem to say, okay, well, maybe this is interesting business
Yeah.
to start. And luckily, I was kind of introduced to my now business partner, our chief science officer and the president of the company. His name's John Miles. He is a chemist, a very brilliant chemist.
Yeah.
And so I really kind of got, it was kind of Batman and Robin at that point,
Yeah.
or I don't know if that's the right analogy, but
Right.
so we really linked up, and he understood our technology. We really understood kind of a sales and marketing angle. So we started the company
Yeah.
and, raised some money, kind of my first company.
Sure.
And I thought it was just something I was going to kind of help. And then, of course, it just consumed me, and COVID had happened. And as I was building the company, I was living in a home. And a couple of the other founders of the company, it was kind of like a startup house, and we
Right.
were all excited. And we knew, even then, we knew there was a giant problem around people being sick from
Mhm.
mold. And we had a very unique technology that was water resistant. It could resist mold for 25 years inside of a home. And So okay, these two things go together. Maybe there's a business here, but what we didn't understand was how complicated the problem was, how big the problem was,
Right.
what really the problem was, and we actually didn't have a solution for it. We have an amazing mold resistant coating that, will outperform any technology on the market.
Hmm.
Really what needed to happen was the detoxification of buildings.
Right.
And that required a whole, we spent 3 years building that. But, kind of back to where I was, I'm living in this house at the very beginning of this journey, thinking I've got an interesting e-commerce, cleaning product that will
Right.
prevent. And living in this house, it was a bigger property. There was a house and then an apartment in the back. And um, like I said, it was kind of a startup house, and there were just different people who would come in, and
Hmm.
everyone who lived in that house got extremely sick.
Really.
And I was in a relationship at the time, and my partner, um, she had had a prior exposure as a child.
Hmm.
I didn't know that. And I didn't understand it even. I found it out, but I still didn't understand. And she
Right.
got extremely sick, and it led to all sorts of issues that eventually led to her kind of a lot of dissociation and
Hmm.
kind of traumatic things that really she then believed that I was going to kill her, and then
Hmm.
she ran away. And so it
Yeah.
was this very traumatic experience in my life. And I at that time, even as I'm building the company, I didn't understand what had happened. I didn't realize the building that we were living in was toxic. It wasn't until 2 or 3 years later, after all the research we had done,
Hmm.
after the doctors, and I'd gotten so deep into it that I kind of turned around and I looked at this thing that had happened in my life, and I said, wait a minute. Oh, that was the
Right.
very thing that I've been spending the last 3 years trying to solve. Like I realized it was the thing that, destroyed my life
Yeah.
and all these relationships and all everyone's health. And so yeah, it definitely, I was passionate about it even before I
Hmm.
realized that it was really the central kind of plot in what had happened to me. And
Right.
then once, that happened, not only did it make me even more passionate, but it really showed me how it can be right in front of your face
Oh, yeah.
and you can miss it.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of I think the really important thing. It's why I like to talk about it so much and go on these podcasts is because there's so many people who've been sick for so long and
Yeah.
it's close, because it's really like right there in front of their
Yeah.
face.
Yeah. Well, and it's something that you may not even know is there,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of times,
Most people
like
don't.
most people don't know it's there until, you know, something triggers somebody to go, okay, well, let's look at your house, right? But I would estimate, especially in older homes, like mold's got to be pretty much in every house.
Well, mold mold pretty much is in every house, but actually it's the newer homes that are the worst. Uh,
Really?
and yeah, and there's a reason for that. So older homes, they weren't as tight,
Hmm.
right? So new homes, when you see them, they're Tyvek wrapped, there's vapor
Right.
barrier, all the windows are sealed, and
Yeah.
that energy efficiency is what drives
Hmm.
that, right?
Right.
On older homes, they breathe,
Hmm.
right? Like your grandparents didn't have mold poisoning, because they didn't have, airtight, energy efficient homes, but they also didn't have old homes that had been retrofitted with HVAC, which is
Right.
where a lot of these problems come in when you introduce, that. So buildings weren't as comfortable, they
Hmm.
weren't as energy efficient, but they weren't as toxic. And now, I mean, a lot of our customers, they're in homes that are sometimes 2, 3 years old, brand new
Oh,
homes.
wow.
And they're like hospitalized sick. Like
Hmm.
they've gotten so sick that they had to flee the homes
Right.
and I see this in 1,500 square foot homes, and we deal with it in multi-million dollar homes from people who
Hmm.
have more money. It's not about that. Like
Right.
it can, like you said, when people don't know that they have it,
Hmm.
when that problem develops, it'll wreck your life, no matter where you are on that
Yeah.
socioeconomic, you
So it
know.
doesn't have anything to do with necessarily like the building codes, because, this area is going to be more affluent, it's going to have, a higher level of quality or whatever you want to call it. But it doesn't really matter there. It's more about like you mentioned breathing, like having the house breathe. Like it's more about getting that outside air in that's going to help like dry everything out
Well,
in a way.
so that buildings being able to breathe is what made them. not as toxic in the past.
Right.
But it's not that a tight home can't be a healthy home.
Okay.
It's that we just don't understand when you get into building science, what's
Hmm.
happening in home building is contractors don't understand HVAC. An HVAC company doesn't know when they oversize a unit that now means that unit's going to shut off quicker because it's
Hmm.
going to cool the house down faster, which means it's not going to dehumidify the air properly, which
Right.
means relative humidity in the home is going to be higher, which means mold will grow, which means it could release toxins, which can drive autoimmune disease, and
Right.
all things. So we didn't understand what was happening,
Gotcha.
and we try and solve a problem. We think, oh, we solved that problem, but we didn't realize what other
Yeah.
problems we're creating.
Right.
So the real the real solution is to build good buildings and manage
Hmm.
moisture correctly,
Right.
and also to have the right tools because you're always going to have moisture inside of a building.
Hmm.
Like you can't avoid it. There's going
Yeah.
to floods are going to happen. Those things
Right.
are going to happen. So you need to have the right tools to manage that. And that's really, what we've built. But the conversation is very large. It
Yeah.
involves, the buildings that you live in, how we build them. It involves how we maintain those buildings and clean them,
Hmm.
what chemicals we use, right? And then it also involves the whole medical system.
Right.
The fact that we have, this is, if you quick back at the napkin math, if you're talking about the government says that, like, let's call it generously, only 50% of homes have mold in it.
Yeah.
That's 170 plus million people that are living in those
Right.
environments. And then, the numbers that everybody throws around today, 40% of people have MTHFR
Hmm.
mutation or some halotype that where they can't. Okay, that's 60 million people
Right.
that are almost certainly experiencing symptoms from
Yeah.
their building. And they're going to the doctor and they're being put on antidepressants for
Hmm.
all of the, brain fog and mental health
Right.
things that happen when you get toxicity in the body. There's autoimmune disease, it's
Hmm.
chronic skin issues, chronic gut issues. The amount of colitis and digestive issues that we see. So, and there's always other factors in this too, right?
Right.
But no one understands that it could be their building. And sometimes, like I said, when it's right in front of your face, it can be so easy. And I tell people this all the time, talking about gut issues. I was working with a client and this was a girl who had pretty severe gut issues. She was emergency room visits and eventually got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis.
Hmm.
And I had seen the home she was living in and the crawl space. I just had a feeling, all the symptoms. And her roommate wasn't sick. And when she left the home, within 36 hours, like all her symptoms, went away.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and that's a very common thing that people don't think about when
Mhm.
you live in an environment, your baseline of health, oh, I've just got a chronic stuffy nose, or oh, my skin is bad, or oh, I'm gaining weight.
Mhm.
It can, there's it can be linked to almost anything because of the variety of effects that kind of inflammation and toxicity
Right.
can have in the body,
Right.
your pre-existing conditions and, all those things. So the easiest way for people to understand, if they're suspicious, if they can't figure out why they're sick all the time, then just go on vacation for a week.
Yeah.
Go outside, like get out of that environment. And if your symptoms clear up, your brain fog clears up, you're not
Hmm.
as anxious, that is your home.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And is it just mold, or are there other things too that could be like part of that puzzle within the
yeah.
home?
There are more things. So mold is primarily, what we're talking about here is building related illness.
Hmm.
And that's a
Hmm.
term that the EPA, came up with to describe diseases and illnesses and symptoms that are caused by contaminants in a building.
Yeah.
Okay. So that can be almost any disease, including
Hmm.
cancer, right, can
Yeah.
be building related illness
Right.
because building related illness isn't a specific, pathogenic disease. It's an umbrella term to describe the root cause
Hmm.
of virtually all disease,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the best way, like I said, to do that is to leave the building, and that's
Hmm.
how you understand. And there are ways to test for it as well.
Right. And I think everybody's probably heard of, maybe not like firsthand, but okay, well, that house had mold toxicity. They shut it down. They put a tarp over it. They cleaned it all out, all of that kind of
Yep.
stuff, right? Um, and it doesn't always have to go that extreme, right? To be able to clean it out and be able to have. But one of the things that I learned several years ago, and I saw it on your website, is that bleach doesn't always do what you think it does when it comes to mold, right?
No, no, it does not. In fact, it can actually make it worse.
Right.
And this is really, the best answer to that question of are there other things? Well, we understand that there's mold,
Mhm.
and most people are starting to understand that mold can make us sick. But mold creates a toxin, a chemical toxin that it uses to primarily to fight bacteria, and they're
Mhm.
called mycotoxins. These are not living organisms. They're like it's like the rattlesnake venom, right? Now,
Gotcha.
rattlesnake venom, that snake can die. You can kill the
Yeah.
mold, but that venom will still kill you because
Yeah.
it's a chemical. And that chemical, we didn't understand this previous to within the last 3 or 4 years, but that chemical is airborne in our buildings because
Mhm.
these water damaged molds, the molds that we knew, could cause allergies and asthma and those types of things, we didn't understand they were making a chemical toxin that is present in agriculture because of the way we store certain types of foods. So
Gotcha.
mycotoxins are food, and the FDA heavily regulates them.
Mhm.
They're carcinogenic, they're linked to all sorts of cancers and all sorts of different things. But we haven't understood that they've been in our homes because these
Mhm.
molds have not just been creating them in agriculture, but they're creating them and they're in our indoor air.
Right.
So what'll happen a lot of times in the case that you just mentioned, you've got a remediator who comes in, he's there to remove the mold, he's tearing out everything. And that's what you should do when you've got
Mhm.
mold that has gotten to that point in a home, you got to get it out.
Yeah.
Once he's done that, if that mold were creating mycotoxins, the chemicals he's using to kill that mold, processes he used to remediate that mold, don't remove or even detect the mycotoxins that are in that environment.
Mhm.
And if you use the chemical like bleach, right, which are a lot of these mold stain removers, and there are a lot of mold remediator guys out there who just they come in and they spray bleach on it because it takes the color out, and then it
Right.
looks like,
Yeah.
that is the worst thing that you can do because when you spray a chemical that doesn't kill, if you're not killing something, then what is that thing going to do? It's going to
Right.
fight
It's gonna
back.
fight back. Yeah.
So it releases those mycotoxins, and now you've made the
Oh,
building more toxic, and that remediator thinks he's done a good job.
right.
There's no way for you to test for that chemical in the home, and this is why, so many people are sick and stay sick even after mold remediation.
Right. So it's not necessarily the mold itself. It's what it's doing to try and protect itself so they can stick around.
Correct.
Which is what a lot of I mean, that's basically what a lot of illnesses do, right? Cancer, it's like you can have cancer and it can be I think all of us are producing cancer cells every day based on the actual definition of a cancer cell. It's an abnormal cell. It's the ones that go, oh, okay, hey, I'm going to actually grow and fight back, and those are the ones that become dangerous and then that nobody wants. And so it's and the same thing with the bad bacteria in our gut microbiome. It's going to fight back. Parasites, they're going to fight back. Everything's trying to survive. And I love the way you put it as far as the rattlesnake, because that's really the heart of it is like you can do a cleanse, you can do a detox of your home, you can do these different things, but if you're not getting both what's creating it, but also the residual effect of it, then it's going to come back.
You're exactly right. And this is kind of our message. And it's the missing link, we
Hmm.
think, between, and you can have conversations about Western medicine, Eastern medicine, the body, mold illness, parasites, that is, but all of that is downstream
Right.
from the root cause of the vast majority of this disease today, which
Hmm.
is the environment and the
Yeah.
toxicity of the environments that we live in. And people are becoming more aware of that, right? We're getting out of this idea of thinking of everything in terms of germ theory. I catch a disease and my body fights it off and I'm rid of it, and that most disease and chronic illness is caused by the accumulation of toxicity in the
Hmm.
body. And
Hmm.
even the pathogenic diseases and things, well, those only have the ability to take over the body because the immune system is so depleted from
Right.
chronically fighting and trying to detoxify. So it always really it really revolves around that environment. And and the environment, again, because we're creating these environments, that the downstream effects of this is it's almost unmeasurable, right?
Right.
Because there's the medical side, but then you have all the interpersonal
Hmm.
dynamics of chronic illness
Right.
and how this doesn't affect men, husband and wives the same, right? And
Yeah.
children and and then it goes on and on and on. So again, our company is so hyper focused to say, well, wait, well, there was this missing link that, yeah, mold remediation and how you take care of that mold. I mean, we already know you have to do that, and there's people who do a
Hmm.
good job of it and a bad job of it. But there are people, there's no solution for that toxin that's left in that building,
Hmm.
that mold remediators can't get out. And
Yeah.
so that's what we created with our system, our three-phase system. People can do this in their home. We made these products so, to give people tools because a lot of
Hmm.
people are stuck in situations. Their mold remediation, their home's gotten so bad they didn't realize what was happening and they couldn't afford it and they still can't afford it. So they're
Right.
kind of just frozen.
Yeah.
And the people we work with every day, I mean, they're sick, their kids are sick, they're in very difficult situations and they're looking for like real steps and solutions and things that they can do. And then we have the people, who are probably listening to this podcast who are going, uh-oh, this might be me,
Right.
I've noticed that smell or that HVAC, and I haven't even talked about, the ways. There's really three simple ways: your HVAC, your crawl space in your basement, and then a hidden leak.
Hmm.
Those are the three ways that homes water damage happens, homes become
Right.
toxic, and over years, I mean, if you hadn't had your HVAC cleaned, if you've got constant allergies, if you wake up every morning with a stuffy nose, if you're constantly bloated, if you have gut issues, if you've got brain fog, if there's anxiety, if your kids are having behavioral issues, if your husband's gaining weight, if you can't sleep at night, I mean, on and on and on,
Right.
I could rattle these off and most people will be like, whoa, whoa, there's some version of those that
Hmm.
I have or my husband has, and they see that, and they're kind of in that place, they go, whoa, uh-oh, now what do I do?
Right.
That's that can be a very scary place. And that's really where we like to come in to help people to say, our system and our products are designed certain ways. We've got a lot of ways to teach people. Our technical team is there. We work with people every day. And then
Yeah.
there's the professional side of it, for people who are like, I'm too sick, to do it myself.
Right.
House is too big, right? Elderly people.
Yeah.
We have, cleaning teams that do it professionally. And then we work with other professional companies around the country who buy our products and use our process to detoxify homes.
Right. Um, and so like from a the typical house you see where it's like, somebody's like, okay, I'm starting to put the pieces together. It's not a massive where you got to start tearing everything out of there and right. It's just like, okay, we need to do some treatment. The typical house you see, like, how long does that take to get the detoxification process done?
Yep. So the superstratum home detox system takes, depending on the size of the house, about two
Mhm.
days. Or
Okay.
you can do an average size home in 2 days.
Yeah.
The three phases. The first phase is a cleaning phase.
Mhm.
So you take a fogger, and we sell these. We sell all the equipment on our website as well. So we
Right.
try to make it easy for people.
Yeah.
But you take our building cleaner and fog that throughout the building, and then it involves a wipe down of all the surfaces.
Mhm.
So a lot of people in the industry now call that a small particle clean.
Mhm.
So we do that fogging and small particle cleaning with our HEHOCl cleaner. So this is a really amazing chemistry. Our research, kind of our white paper research, what we really launched our system on was showing that we could destroy a mycotoxin
Mhm.
with the chemical. That really hadn't been done before. Most of all the chemicals that you use to kill mold and all the disinfectants, they don't destroy the chemical.
Right.
So we developed a way to do that, and that's kind of what the first part of the system does. You wipe everything down, you get all the dust out because the dust is where those toxins really, they're sticky, they stick to that
Right.
dust. And
Right.
after that first phase, you kind of do that throughout the day. And that a lot of times it involves, this will determine a lot too, how much stuff you have.
Hmm.
A lot of people need to, we tell people to clean out all their cardboard boxes. When you do this, it's not just a detoxification of the home, it's like a detoxification of the soul.
Right.
You're cleansing, you're letting go of things.
Yeah.
Because mold grows on like old books and old
Hmm.
cardboard and papers. And you just over the years, you don't realize what builds up.
Yeah.
So depending on that, but generally you take about a day to do all that cleaning. And then as you go into that night, you move into the second phase. And that's a gas phase. So we have our superstratum deodor bombs in there, dried, look like a little dried sponge, little
Hmm.
packet. And you fill up the container that they come in with water, and then you put them in there, and then that will start to create chlorine dioxide gas. Chlorine dioxide is a very powerful oxidation chemical as well.
Mhm.
There's studies that show that it also destroys mycotoxins. The problem is chlorine dioxide gas is nobody could ever use it because like they used it in the anthrax attacks in Washington, but you had to tent buildings and make these
Right.
big machines and
Yeah.
it just wasn't really available. But this technology that we have delivers a specific amount of it. So each room you put, the different packets depending on the size of the room. So you
Gotcha.
fill the hole. So that whole airtight building envelope,
Yep.
now what we want to do is we want to fill it all up with that gas.
Yeah.
And that will get in all those places you can't see. It'll also
Right.
break down VOCs and different things.
Yeah.
And then you come back the next morning, open up the home, air that out, and then you apply the coating. And our coating is a proprietary technology that we own. It's an invisible, water resistant, mold resistant coating. You can put it inside your home, outside your home, carpet, furniture,
Mhm.
wood. You just need a very light coat and it'll last inside a home for, 10, 20 years. And it can get wet hundreds of times. So that really gives you that insurance going forward,
Right.
those areas where moisture might occur.
Right.
So that whole process is like if somebody, that regular home where you're like, well, it's just a little musty. We know it needs that cleaning.
Yeah.
There's HEPA. We tell people in our protocols, we got instruction manuals and videos and tells them how to clean and use the HEPA vac. So if they just need to do that, then, that is what our system does. It's
Mhm.
that level of cleaning. And you can go to our website. We have kits that are kind of put together. And then we also have a custom order wizard where people can create an account, create their home and enter in all the rooms.
Oh,
And it'll
cool.
create a custom order of everything that they need, all those
Right.
materials, and then instructions on how to do it in their home.
Right. Cool. Um, so that's not like that's a lot less invasive than having your house tinted and torn apart and
Yeah.
rebuilt and which I mean that happens at times, right? And it's I mean there's things that do happen, but I remember back to one of the places I was working relatively early out of college and um there was a leak in one of the bathrooms and it must have started like by the way that the building was it had to have started like Friday night and like nobody was in the building until Monday
Yeah.
morning, because the place was just soaked all the way through. Carpets just soaked everything. And I remember going through that process of, having the people come out and try and dry everything out and all that. And I remember looking at it all going like, there's no way this is gonna dry everything. There's no way it's gonna get rid of like, and I live in Texas where it's hot and it's still like I was like, there's going to be mold growing under these carpets. Like I can guarantee you that,
Yep.
And so for people that go through something like that, I mean, I can see this as being a massive, um, you know, uh, life changer really, because it's going to stop that process. And like you said earlier and even with your story is I don't think people understand how much the different toxins when they get in your body, what they actually do. And how many of them can go across the brain, the blood barrier in the brain and start affecting, your chemical reactions in your brain and what you're feeling and thinking and
Mhm.
and how those reactions are all happening. And a lot of times when you have those mood swings and you can't get out of them, it's what's your toxic load?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're living in a toxic environment, it's it's never just one thing.
Mhm.
And it is this kind of as your body breaks down, as your body becomes more toxic, that's when you get okay, mycotoxins and mold in the body create the right environment for parasites to live,
Yeah.
right? Parasites in the body create, the gut does this, and then all of a sudden things start just kind of layering on, and now you've
Mhm.
just got this goop, right, of
Right.
a whole, and where do you start? And
Mhm.
good doctors who know how to detoxify the body know how, and it's all individual, right?
Mhm.
Based on that person, their exposure, what all they have,
Right.
what needs to be done, in what order.
Mhm.
It can be very difficult to treat that. But again, so many people, obviously the majority of people who are experiencing symptoms just need to get that home cleaned,
Right.
and simply by cleaning the home, your body is gonna start healing itself. It's gonna start
Yeah.
getting healthier because now it's not under that load. And what you said about, the moods and the feelings, I mean, all of these things, It really is. This is a spiritual sickness
Hmm.
because it affects your entire being.
Right.
It affects your emotions. It affects your thoughts. It even people who experience mold sickness, they even have like all these spooky, it's paranormal. There's dreams. Like it really just affects your entire being,
Yeah.
and that is something that we understand too. And we, when you're dealing with people who are going through these types of things, you're really trying to give them holistic care. And,
Yeah.
that's the holistic model is really the model we've taken for the environment to say, like, look, we want to have, everything available for people themselves. And sometimes you got to call that remediator and rip
Hmm.
the wall out, right?
Right.
But there was nothing that existed to, put tools into people's hands because like you said, once your moods and your thoughts and the depression and it's like all those things living inside you, they want you sad and they want you curled up in
Right.
that dark room, that dark moldy home. And just taking action and doing something and
Hmm.
cleaning, decluttering, not only does that create a healthier environment for your body, but it starts to trip those same dopamine receptors to like
Right.
get you, I say like that's why on TikTok, one of the biggest content, it's all the clean talk and
Yeah.
it's just people cleaning because there's something about us that when you're organizing and cleaning and making things pure, like it's hard coded kind of into
Hmm.
our DNA. And I believe it's the reason why you see all of that in all the different religions about these purity rituals and codes,
Right.
because they knew that, okay, well, if the outer temple gets all
Yeah.
mold, then the inner temple is going to get moldy, and
Right.
then it's going to block that relationship to God and to Source,
Right.
um, and I think that's a big part of this that I think people are also going to begin to wake up to when we start realizing like what it actually is that makes us sick,
Yeah.
and what makes us well. Those things are things within our control,
Yeah.
for the most part. But they're things we're accountable to that we have to be disciplined for.
Right.
Um, and stepping into that is the whole journey.
Well, and I think that's a huge piece from from understanding yourself is like if and I sort of relate it to like you get caught up in a relationship when you're younger, right? You're dating, you're somebody, but everybody around you is like, why are you with this person? Like
Mhm.
this person is quote toxic for you, right?
Yeah,
Like, but you're just like you're stuck on one simple thing and you're just like I can't get away. It's like whatever that factor is that keeps you going back to that person. And then when you do get away, you're like like the light bulb comes on, you're like, oh, I see what you're talking about. I see all these things. And especially if they're in the same general circle that you're in and you see them out every on occasion and you're just like, wow, I can't believe I was with that person for so long. Um, and and so it's sort of the same way. It's like once you get away from the toxins and you realize like, oh, I am a different person. I am able to connect better with other people, with God, with the environment, with it does change who you are in a positive way because now your body's back to being whole again.
you're exactly right. And that is what makes it what I call a spiritual disease because
Hmm.
it's a disease of the identity.
Yeah.
It's when you have chronic illness, you form an identity of being sick.
Hmm.
Chronic illness communities form, and like or I've learned, when you meet someone who's sick, who truly wants to get well, and
Hmm.
when you meet someone who's sick who doesn't want to get well,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
they want because the sickness is who they are, you
Right.
know, and that is the thing that everyone who heals from chronic illness, you know, comes has some experience with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When they leave that environment, when they change who they are, and they realize, wait a minute, I'm I'm like a different person. And I've seen, people I've worked with who, when that shift has happened, like their whole wardrobe changes and they go from
Right.
like colors to like colorful colors and their
Hmm.
personality changes. And
Yeah.
it's really it's hard sometimes for people to admit how sick they are
Yeah.
and and how it has changed them and how, yeah, over the years I've gotten more depressed and then
Hmm.
my humor has changed and my friend group has changed and and it really can all go back to
Yeah.
you had a leak,
Yeah.
roof
Yeah.
leaked,
Yeah.
or the humidity or your HVAC hasn't been cleaned. I mean, I've talked to people who were suicidal, and I mean the stories I could tell on and
Yeah.
on and on and on. And there was, yeah, their HVAC hadn't been cleaned, or
Right.
their place was musty.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's it's it's an enormous problem when it develops, but
Hmm.
it's so simple to solve it on the front
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. Um, if you and like with so many other things, like if you identify it, right? When you don't identify it or you identify it incorrectly, which again goes back to, okay, I go to the doctor and they put me on medication for my depression or they put me on this for that. And we don't go back to maybe it's my environment, maybe it's my house that's, causing a piece of it. And so my guess would be if you're somebody who goes to the doctor for you've got one of these problems that's going on and you're just like, I can't figure out what's going on. I'm trying to eat well, I'm trying to exercise and just not getting anywhere. And your doctor says something about toxicity, should that just be the automatic like, oh, I need to check my house? Like as soon as toxins enters the vocabulary?
I would say as soon as chronic illness enters,
Yeah. Yeah.
chat, as
Yeah.
soon as the doctor doesn't know, as soon as your care becomes palliative, as soon
Hmm.
as like, then yes, you should. And the big problem is that your doctor, first of all, very few doctors are going to say anything about
Right.
toxin,
Right.
but those doctors certainly aren't going to say anything about your home or your
Hmm.
environment, you know?
Yeah.
And the ones that don't know anything about mold or toxins is even worse because they don't even see that it's mold. They're going to start
Yeah.
giving you drugs,
Right.
pharmaceutical,
Right.
antidepressant, these types of things. Because, oh, they see that you have a condition and they say, okay, let's just manage that condition. We don't know what causes it, but we've got drugs that can manage it,
Right.
and even functional doctors say, okay, there's mold, there's toxins, but they don't have any control over that environment. And that is, a lot of our partners and affiliates and partnerships are on the medical side, with clinics and with doctors and with online, health influencers who
Hmm.
have audiences of people who are, they're helping coach,
Right.
or even their patients in the clinic's case that they're treating, but they don't have an option,
Yeah.
for the environment side. And so, yeah, that really is our focus, is our mission. I mean, there are other cleaning companies out there, but
Hmm.
our mission is specifically around this problem of building related illness and
Yeah.
creating processes and chemicals, to end that.
Yeah. So we've talked about the home a lot, but is this also something that is in like commercial buildings? Obviously, I would think mold's gonna, it doesn't care if it's a home or like if it's a building related illness, like it could be, okay, I come home and is it, but is it the office space that I'm in?
Yeah, it is. The government says about the same number of offices have
Yeah.
ongoing water damage issues.
Yeah.
So the office, it can also be the car. We have a car
Oh.
detox kit, and there's a really interesting story I told the other day. I met a customer, and or actually, this was through a friend, and she had been very sick. She was a hairstylist. She had a young child. She was pregnant, had to
Hmm.
stop working. She'd gotten so sick. Her baby was sick. And I heard through the grapevine, I said, yeah, that definitely sounds like, mold.
Hmm.
And we talked on the phone, I kind of told her, I said, call an environmentalist or leave the home. But yeah, and her doctor, I think, had for the first time suggested that it might be mold. So she was
Hmm.
kind of already thinking that way and trying to figure out what was going on.
Right.
And she called an environmentalist out and who tested the home. And her intuition told her to test her car.
Hmm.
And the environmentalist, because it was like a flood damage title, and the
Oh, yeah.
environmentalist said, well, I've never tested a car before, but she made him do it. And they found all the mold in the car. And so
Yeah.
they were getting exposed, her and her baby driving in their
Hmm.
car.
Yeah.
So yeah, the home is the most common place,
Hmm.
but sometimes it is not the home. And sometimes it's more than one of those places.
Right. Right. Which I would think would be just, even like just stacking on, just snowballing the problem, right? The
Yep.
more the more places you're exposed to it. Um, so interesting about the car because my wife and I, we had just gotten married, got a new car, and I tell people and they think I'm laughing, but I'm like, we were hit by a deer because it was running across a field heading towards the highway, and we saw it coming, and we were like, and it hit the side, the passenger door. Um, so, we took it and got it repaired. Um, but ever since then, every time it would rain, she would be like, my car smells like mildew. My car smells like, and I'm like, I don't smell it. Like, I don't. And she's like, no, my car smells. So we soon after that traded in, got something else. Because we were just like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm not dealing with you complaining about it. And the people said they fixed it, but obviously they didn't. There was a leak
Yeah.
somewhere that water was getting through. And so that story, I relate to that. Like I totally believe that can be an issue. Um, and again, I think it's just so it's like, it's where do you spend the most time? That's the
Yep.
first place to look. It's not the only
Yeah.
place to look, but the first place to look.
Exactly. And our deodor bombs that I mentioned, which are the second step of our process,
Mhm.
they're great for the cars for that very reason. Like my car does the same thing.
Yeah.
It starts raining and it starts getting, and so every few months or so, I'll put one in the car and
Yeah.
I'll bomb the car. And it also works very well for VOCs.
Mhm.
So that new car smell,
Yeah.
those are VOCs, those are chemicals, and people who have chronic illness, chemical sensitivities, are very sensitive to those VOCs.
Right.
So that's another way, like I said, it's not just the mold or even the mycotoxins,
Right.
but there are other chemicals. And that really what happens is once someone gets that toxicity, they become sensitive to just about every
Yeah.
chemical.
Yeah.
They develop a general sensitivity.
Right. Right. Well, and you mentioned this earlier, is like once it starts and other ones are introduced, the immune system's getting so busy with so many different things that then other things that shouldn't be a problem for you become things that just your body can't handle at that point.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly
So,
right.
all right. So, how can people that are listening, they're like, okay, I need more information. How can they follow along with what y'all are doing, the website and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is superstratumlabs.com. They can go there. We've got a lot of resources, learning some different
Mhm.
videos. Um, we explain our whole home detox system. All that information is there, and then we also have our store. And at that store, we've got all the SuperStratum line of products. We have lots of different sprayers and foggers and those types of equipment.
Yeah.
And then a couple of other products. So our SuperStratum line are mycotoxin design cleaners, really designed
Mhm.
to clean those toxins and certain other things like that. We also have a product called Pure One, which is a EPA registered disinfectant, mold, biofilm killer. Those are tablets. So you can learn about some of our other products like
Mhm.
that. And we just introduced some new wipes. So we've always got new things
Mhm.
coming out. So that's our
Cool.
shopping experience. They can find
Cool.
it there online. We're on Instagram at superstratum.co,
Okay.
on TikTok as well at superstratum. So people can
Awesome.
find us there.
Awesome. And I'll link all those in the show notes for people. Um, well, is there anything that we didn't touch on that people are like commonly asking you questions about when it comes to the building related illnesses?
I think we pretty much covered it. Yeah.
Okay,
We
good.
we got we covered the gamut. I would, the thing I kind of like to say to close it up most of the
Mhm.
time is a lot of people, and I think I mentioned this earlier, a lot of people who are listening to this are kind of in that state where something clicked, a light
Right.
bulb went off. And that is both, for some people, that's exciting, and for some people, that's very scary.
Sure.
And then there's some people who are really frozen. They
Mhm.
know the position they're in, they don't feel like they have a solution. And I would say, to those people that the most important thing is just to start taking action,
Yeah.
right? To move. Motion is the thing that creates healing.
Mhm.
And you don't have to know what the next step is. And our products are designed to help you, but our team and our company and our mission is really designed to like help people in that process.
Right.
So, I give people that encouragement to say, you're sick, get out of the home, see if that's causing it. And if it is, take action because the
Yeah.
impact that it will have on your life if you fix that problem is immeasurable. It's not conceivable to most people who are
Mhm.
sick because they don't understand how deeply it's
Right.
seeped into all these areas of their life.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I
thanks
think
for
that's a big thing because it's like, how can it fix all of these other things? But like you mentioned before, is if it's the root cause, then everything else, and you get rid of it, everything else has to clear up.
Yep.
So,
We'll certainly start that process.
yep. So, Seth, I want to thank you for being a guest. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, Jerry, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.